Did you know that speaking Chinese requires more brain power than speaking English? So, in 2003, researchers at the Wellcome Trust Foundation in the United Kingdom published a research article stating that Chinese speakers actually use both sides of their brain as opposed to English speakers who use only the left side of their brain. So, what does this mean, right? It means that when you're learning Chinese, there's a lot more complexity that goes into learning the language, right? So with English, you have an alphabet, you have spelling, you have all of these rules that pretty much take away a lot of the processing that you have to do when you get information. For instance, when somebody speaks to you, you don't have to go, oh, what does that mean? Or what does that sound translate to? You can go, oh, okay, I heard an A, it's an A. I heard a B, it's a B. And you can pretty much sound out a word for the most part, right? But with Chinese, it's a tonal language, so you don't get that advantage. So when I say it's a tonal language, it means that when you're speaking Chinese, the pitch of your voice actually helps carry the meaning of what you're trying to say. So there's this word shu, right? Like it can mean book or it can mean to lose, and they sound exactly the same. So with Chinese, you have so many different neural connections that your brain has to make. It has to know what a character looks like. It has to know what a character sounds like. And then it also has to know how to be able to write the character, right? Maybe with a reference, maybe without a reference. But these are a lot more visual and audio inputs that we have to be able to take in and then process. So with English, this is a completely different story. So because of that, Chinese actually requires using a different part of your brain to make these additional associations. So when you think about learning Chinese, you can really break it down into 4 areas. You have your reading, writing, speaking, and listening. For the most part, when you think about fluency, speaking and listening are the most important because these are the actual skills that are actually carrying you into what you're trying to do. So for instance, if you're having a conversation, you can't speak to somebody without being able to pick up what they say, and at the same time, you can't speak if you don't have any words or if you don't know how to pronounce words correctly. So that's kind of like a high level of kind of how you would look at and assess fluency in Chinese. So what does this all mean, right? So when you approach learning Chinese, at least traditionally now, we kind of approach this in a backwards manner. So instead of most people trying to perfect and get good at speaking, a lot of us are actually doing the opposite, where we focus and put a lot of emphasis on trying to master characters and be able to write all of the characters before we're even comfortable with speaking and hearing or recognizing these characters, right? So from my perspective, I see speaking, listening, and then reading as the most important skills, where writing will come last. And that will be at I would say kind of like at the final levels of your mastery. For instance, when you look at, even in America, right? Most people are not great writers. They can speak the language, they can hear the language, and most people can read. But when it comes to writing, everybody is going to have a bit of a struggle when it comes to the average population, right? I'm not talking about the English professors and the writers and all the great, thinkers in that space. I'm just talking about the average person. So when you're learning Chinese, I actually wanted to create a community for that because of a lot of the isolation. So the biggest reason that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with speaking Chinese with native speakers is because we simply just don't have the vocabulary. So when you're learning Chinese, you have 4,000, some people say 6,000. It kind of varies depending on what you're doing. If you're a professional and like a lawyer, a doctor, then there's going to be a lot more vocabulary that you're going to have to know. But in general, Chinese has about 100,000 or so characters that are all unique. So you don't need to know all of these, but they do exist and they are out there. So it just shows you just how vast of a vocabulary that you may or may not need depending on what you're doing. So when I was in China, I actually came up with a platform for learning Chinese. So from my perspective, when I was in China, I wasn't a beginner and I also wasn't this super advanced user. So when I wanted to build up my vocabulary, I couldn't really do that in the way that I wanted to. I tried out all of these different apps. I tried out Playco. I was using Duolingo. I was using Quizlet, and they didn't really scratch what I needed them to do for me. So that's when I came up with the idea for Mondo Bridge. With Mondo Bridge, it's essentially the built-in dictionary, and then you also have flashcards and quizzes. The next step for Mondo Bridge is to go into the community development, where people will actually be able to socialize with other learners, connect with teachers, and even speak with native speakers. Of course, this is going to take a lot of help and support from you guys. So what I'm going to need you all to do is to follow along, support us along the journey, and then join us on the platform. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more content like this, please like, subscribe, and follow us on the platforms.